Good morning, everybody. Okay, all right. Good morning to you. Um, what is it? Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday. Happy Wednesday to you. I know I'm early, but go ahead and get up, wake up, y'all. Get ready. Somebody boss gonna be calling in a minute talking about is this gonna be your 14th sick day? No, you's gonna be number 15 because you ain't coming in today or tomorrow either. Go ahead and get up and get started with the day. Listen, I wanted to leave motivation, inspiration. Um, for me, that's just happens to be devotion. Somebody said to me the other day, they said, Jeremiah, why do you be wearing sunglasses? I said, well, Doc, if you knew the power of light, you'd also have on a pair of sunglasses. But see, when you don't know God, you live in darkness and you need sunglasses in the dark. I use quite a bit of light. I use quite a bit of light when I'm filming. If you record a film or do anything with your camera, you know the importance of light. Even the Bible speaks about the importance of light. God said, before I created anything, before I ever named anything, before I pulled the man out the dust and created him to be, he said, first thing that I did, Jeremiah, I didn't create the sun. I didn't create the light switch. I called the light. And then God knew the importance of light, and therefore his son became the light that was amongst men. And we are the light that comes from him, the light of the world. And you got to know that before I was salt, I was light. And so they can throw shade, but they only throw shade at a place where it is light. But let me tell you, today I wanted to focus on Joshua chapter 6, I believe. Me and Nicole read it, talked about it, discussed it. We deliberated on it last night, and I just wanted to drop a few points that I think were pertinent in that particular conversation that I hope is edification but help in reliance form on to you today, especially when we talk about it in real world sense. Want to be relatable, applicable, still want to be substantially biblical. But what good is the word if is not applicable? What good is knowing all these scriptures and coming on here every single day if nobody's being reached because the word isn't relevant? So I struggle sometimes because I get in my habit of preaching or teaching and get in my habit of going, flowing in the text because it sounds good to me. But we end up missing people who need it because that Bible, they ain't never read it. They don't know it. They can't understand what I'm talking about in my theological terms and terminology. I have no idea. It just sounds crazy. And so my assignment, my job, my purpose, my initiative and my response is to take the word from just something that we read or that we hear to something that we feel, that it can be tangible and emotional. It can be spiritual and still dimensional, where it hits every part of you, not only yesterday, but tomorrow and the next day and the day after that as well. So when we go to Joshua chapter 6, I don't know if you know the story or not, but let me do a rundown for you real quick. The story of Joshua was one that he was called to be the leader of the children of Israel after Moses died. The Bible says that Moses was led or called by God to set his people free. They were in slavery or in bondage in a land named Egypt. Well, when they got to Egypt, not the Israelites, but Moses and his brother Aaron, when they got to Egypt, they commanded of the Pharaoh to set God's people free. He refused. After a few, I think, rebuttals of him and God and Moses and Aaron going back and forth, God convinced him, persuaded him to his death, but still persuaded him to let the people go. He let them go, and while they were in the walk on the way to the promised land, catch what happened. That they were on the walk on the way to the promised land after God parted the Red Sea and allowed them to cross it, after God fed them manna raining down from heaven and allowed them to eat it, after providing them water when Moses struck the rock and the spring came out of it. After doing all of that, they had to wander in the wilderness, in the wild. They had to wander in the desert for 40 years. When they're wandering, God told Moses, the promised land you won't be able to enter. So I'm appointing somebody amongst you to lead the people who are coming behind you. When Joshua is chosen, he's chosen for a task to lead disobedient people, infuriating people, frustrating people, even so much so that the man that walked with God about his walk with the people, it made him stumble. And Joshua, who may be spiritual but don't have the relationship Moses had, is called to lead them. I want to pick up right here because that's where we start off in Joshua chapter 6. Is that many times God will call you to do something that it seems like you're underqualified for, that you're not really ordained for. It don't really look right on you because it don't seem right to you. That why was there more people who were trained who didn't get the position? Well, why was somebody who was big enough for but fell prey to it, left it up to you? And the responsibility, the light of it is all over you. And I know that because God can handle whatever he puts on you for you to come through. See, you got to begin to allow God to handle that too. You got to begin to put it in his hands and say, God, this bigger than me, so I need you to help me. That it's greater than what I know of my capacity. So I don't look for my own initiative for me to do it. I just hand it over to God. God, you take it, you handle it, you do it. God calls Joshua to lead the people into the promised land. In chapter 6, he gives them certain instructions and tells them, here's how I want you to do it. Give every priest that's in the camp a horn. Catch it? Give them a horn and tell them to sound it only one time a day. Do that for 6 days exactly. He tells them, not only do I want them to do that, but I want the people who's following them to carry weapons. Please don't use them. And the people following them, don't be afraid of them, but be silent behind them. Now you got to get the gravity of this. If you haven't heard the story of when the children of Israel are screaming at the city walls of Jericho, and then God brought the wall down, here is the relatable terms of it. A lot of times you'll be promised something that is hard for you to handle in your mental, because the thing that God promised you is in front of you, but you just can't walk into it. A lot of the times he'll create something, he'll make something, he'll call you for a task that's bigger than you, but it stands right in front of you. I imagine that after 40 years of walking around in the wilderness, somebody's tired. I imagine after 40 years of looking at it, thinking about it, dreaming about it, there's somebody that's sick of praying and sick of hearing. There's somebody sick of singing and somebody sick of just being in a place of just watching it and other people inhabit it. I'm tired of coming to church praying about something that I see right in front of me that God promised for me, and it don't really look like it's for me. That's what Joshua said to the children of Israel who were frustrated. He said, I know you tired of it. I know you sick of just hearing God say stuff that seemed like bullshit. I know that you are upset. I know it frustrates you. But listen, the command of God was not for you to come here and complain. It's for the priests to blow their horns, for the people behind the priests to carry the weapons, and for everybody else, be silent until you're told to shout. Said, I want you to do that for 7 days. 6, encumbrant, for you to walk around it, see it, don't say nothing. I think many times God calls us to walk around what we're about to walk into, but he did not tell the people. He told Joshua when they would be through. You got to know that what God has called for you, many times other people won't understand it. Just fall in line with it. Fall in line and stop trying to explain to people why. Stop trying to explain and get them to understand how he's going. Stop trying to make it make sense for people who ain't got the sense to realize that God said it, so it don't have to make sense. He just makes it works out for your good. He don't say it's going to make good sense. He says it's going to work out for you. But a lot of the times working out for you don't make sense to you because it's not called for you to understand it. It's called for you to faith it and just believe it. He says, I'll make it so that every time you start to doubt, you got to walk it out. I want to be so tied into my purpose. I want to be so tied into my destined future. I want to be so tied into my calling that every time I start to doubt God, that he'll march me around the promise. You understand what I'm saying? He told the disciples, Jesus did, told the disciples when they were concerning the mountain and how they could move it. He tells them, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, that you'll be able to speak to it. But I find out in John, I think chapter 19 or 16, that, no, I think it's John chapter 19, that Jesus was opposed by a man and his son at the bottom of the mountain. And it did not say he moved it, but it said that he went around it. That there are some places God has called you to that you don't have to go through, you just have to go around. The faith here in the side of the mountain where the disciples come and ask Jesus, why couldn't we have set the little boy free? He tells them that there's some things that you only have to pray about and fast about. There's some stuff you can't handle by yourself. And if you try and do it by yourself, catch what'll happen. You'll end up failing, falling prey to the attack of the enemy. But know this on the day that when you think you can, he says, even in those places, to lift your hands and know that God still did it. I know that the mountain that they faced was big for them, but the same was the one that the children of Israel faced in the wild before they came into the promised land. A lot of the times God will put you at the base of it so that you can see it, but not understand it, because it's not for you to interpret. It's just for you to go through it. So they have to march around the city. The Bible says they have to march around it one time per day for 6 days total. Catch it? They're marching around something that didn't make sense on the outside, because on the inside, there were people waiting, occupying it. So you got to know people watching you. It don't matter if they pop up here or pop up later, if they catch it on the replay or if they catch it on the rewind. You got to know that they're watching to see just how your witness is in the wilderness. See, you can't faint, you can't fail, you can't always fall out and have a tantrum. You can't always be whining and complaining. You can't always be talking about, oh, woe is me, and telling everybody else got it better than what you got to know that somebody's watching your walk and your witness while you're in the wilderness. Can you be around it and not be influenced by it? Can you still be purposed and assigned to do greater, to know God is still in your ladder, even though you can't see it or understand it right here? I know that seems hard. That seems impossible. It seems like something that's going to miss you. But watch it. God said, be silent, because it's right in front of you. For 6 days, they're walking around the city. The priest is blowing the alarm. The soldiers have their swords. And somewhere, somebody thought a war broke out. And the person beside him said, be quiet. It's going to be alarming. Be quiet. It's going to be hard to carry. Said, be quiet. It's going to be difficult. The stuff that you've been through, and you got it pressing up against your mind. But God said, don't go to counseling in this season. I just need you to be quiet and march around it. I imagine in my head that after 40 years, God telling Moses, you can't enter the promised land, was not just for him, but for people with that same mindset as him. So not only did everybody who exited Egypt alive, died in the wilderness, could not walk into the promised land, but somebody had to bury the bodies. So when they get ready to march around it, catch it, they're carrying every dead body that died in the wilderness. I'm holding it on me. You're talking about weight of worry. Talk about the weight of your family that passed before you, and you too young to understand why, but you got to carry the weight of it. You talk about having kids as well. So they had to reproduce because everything that came out couldn't go into the next land because the mindset of where they thought that they worshiped Egypt and Pharaoh. God says the only God that you'll ever serve is going to be me. And if you can't do that, then you're no good on going into the promised land. So they had to give up people who they started the journey with. They had to leave them because God said kill it. That's what they're carrying. When we talk about them walking around weighted, we talk about them carrying family issues that were deep seated, but because grandmama and them died, they didn't even have a chance to deal with it. You're talking about wondering how God parted the Red Sea for all of them, but he can't feed me and my kids. We struggling trying to get milk, trying to get WIC, trying to get food stamps. No, we don't make nothing, but they saying that we got too much of a promise on us, so they won't grant it to us. It's difficult what they carry. The guilt of shame, the lack of not even knowing your family's heritage or your name, a place where you're not sure how it's going to work out, who it's going to turn. Friends that's not friendly, family act like they enemies. The peace that you thought you knew, you can't find it, you don't know it. Since they're carrying it for 7 days. I says, I don't even want you crying. Don't even complain. Just be quiet. And then came the seventh day, and I'm done. The seventh day comes, and Joshua tells them, now I want you to walk around the city 7 times. For every day you prayed and God didn't hear it, walk around it. For every time you fasted, praying that God heal them and he took them, walk around it. For everybody who hurt you, who played around you, talking about you weren't as assigned, you weren't as gifted, you're not as good as what you thought that you were, walk around it. It's for everybody that died on you, everybody who walked away and left you, everybody who said that you wouldn't amount to nothing, you might as well give up, go home. Promised land, that ain't gonna be on your list. That's not for you to own. It says take it and don't become bitter, but use it, put it on your back so you can walk around it and become better. So I want you to embody the walk. Because every bit of frustration, don't miss your shout. If every bit of agony, don't miss it. Every point of potential that you thought God wasn't relevant, he still wasn't real in it. Now I want you to shout about it. And I think they released something so critical. They released something so vital. They released something so necessary to the challenge that stood in front of them, that it could only be expressed not in words, but by shouting to it. I don't know what the shout was. I don't know what it sounded like. I'm not sure if they had a war cry or if they was just screaming, God help. But I know that somewhere Joshua released it and the people shouted about it and the walls came down around them. And today I just speak that over you, that every wall, every border, every blockage, every hindrance I speak that over your life today, that every form of attack that raised up against you, every standard that the enemy would plant before you, every time that you were knocked down by deep promotion and being undetermined, every time that you would doubt it and not believe it, that God said it, this is what I want you to do. He says, just walk around it. And at some point in time, you got to shout about it. And when they released all that pain, all that agony, all that stress, all that hell, all that fight, all that undetermined, undermined, undermean, and unpurposed attitude, that's when the walls came down. So today I'm just speaking that the wall is coming down. Today I just claim that whatever was built up, that this shout releases it. And God, I know you to be big enough to do it. I know you to be large enough not to be offended, and not by my shouting at it. He says, I wanted you not only to walk around and see it, but I wanted you to get introspective of what the promise was that you're about to walk into. And when you're tired of walking around it, it should warrant a response that I'm going to scream about it. It says, I'm going to scream until God hears me and bring the walls down. I'm tired of walking around it, just looking at it, but I want to know it for myself that God promised it to me. So I won't just stand around being silent, but I'm sick of walking around looking at my promise, not walking into it. Now I've got to shout about it. It says that when they started walking, that's when somebody catch wind in their mind and say, I'm tired of this. And you got to be so tired of walking around and seeing other people inhabit it that you got to scream about it and say, God, I know you to be big enough to fix this. I know you to be great enough to change this. I know you to be big enough that everything that's fortified against me, that's what Nicole said. She said the wall was secure. It was fortified. But God didn't care about how much security they had on the walls. He said your shout would be enough to bring it down. And so I'm bringing down strongholds over my blood and over my name. I'm bringing down strongholds that were stood against us, saying that we couldn't make it, that we wouldn't be it. That you got to begin to pray on those things, to fast on those things, to shout on those things, to know that God is still the same God who not only was able to bring the city walls of Jericho down, but I know he's still big enough to repair, to replace, to replenish, and still destroy some obstacles that stand in your way, stopping you from getting to your promise. So don't be confused about it, but be affirmed in it, that you're not only walking around it just to see it in this season. It says, but today I need you to know I put you around it so that you could get introspective of it. So when you got tired of just looking at it, you could shout about it. God would bring it down, let you walk into it. Pray you live here today in safety and security. Know that the same God who did it for them, same God who'll do it for you, he'll do it again.